Ritual has been far and away my least favorite League mechanic since it was first introduced, or at least prior to patch 3.24, but I kinda like it now. I think it's a fun, low-cost gamble. Hi, it's Lerald, and I'm gonna talk about how I just did 64 maps worth of Ritual. I'm gonna go over the costs and some of the cool stuff I pulled out of it, and whether I think it was worth my time. But first, don't forget to like and subscribe. So this is going to be a bit of a different kind of currency video. This is less of a, here's what I did and you should do it too, and these are the exact numbers, and more of a, check out what I did type of video. I had started out thinking that I would just do the normal thing, talk about costs, profits, and so on, but Ritual's a very weird mechanic. Prior to this patch, most of the time when people would add Ritual into their maps, they weren't actually doing it for the purpose of Ritual rewards. It was just there as a juicing mechanic. It adds several very large packs of dudes, and it lets you re-kill a lot of monsters for an extra shot at loot, so it's a very effective, cheap juicing mechanic. As for actually doing Ritual for real, the way GGG intended for it to work as a mechanic, my thought process had been that it is an extremely dumb gamble mechanic that makes no currency most of the time and then eventually has a huge payday. You'll see people post on Reddit about buying mirrors with Ritual, or being one favor short of being able to defer a mirror, that kind of Reddit sad post. It's a slot machine, and it can be really rewarding if you spin the slot machine enough times, pull that handle enough times. I'm sure I will get a Mirror of Kalandra on the next spin. But, you know, it's like the saying goes, 100% of gamblers quit right before they strike it big. All right, I'll cut in here just to say that, like, this is napkin math, this is not hard and fast, it's definitely RNG, but with all of that, all those prefaces, those caveats being said, I think I probably was making over 10 divines an hour just from Ritual. Isolating Ritual as a mechanic, not including anything else, I think it actually was generating over 10 divines an hour throughout the course of this test. There's a lot of RNG there, a lot of caveats, I get all of that. But with all that being said, I do think that's a pretty good return on the investment, which isn't very high, for such an easy strategy that can be done in tier 16 maps with a character that really doesn't even need to be that strong. GGG added some really strong looking scarabs for Ritual in this league, so I wanted to try them out and see how much they actually boost the consistency of Ritual windows in terms of giving you stuff, and let's just take a look at those scarabs now. They are right here, Ritual Scarab of Selectiveness and Ritual Scarab of Abundance. These are both limit 2, and quite frankly, I think you should just run 2 of each. That is the approach I took for the first 50 rituals. There is also Ritual Scarab of Recognition, which I misread the very first time I looked at it, and I thought, wow, enemies slain at ritual altars grant 200% more tribute. Oh my god, no, unique enemies only. Not very good, unfortunately. So I went with Ritual Scarab of... I'm sure there is a use for this. If you are using blood-filled vessels that are full of bosses, you could throw this in and give yourself 30,000 tribute to work with. Great. For the most part, being able to use the Ritual Scarab of Selectiveness, which just to read it off, it allows you to reroll favors 1 additional time, which by default you only get 1 reroll. You're able to get 3 rerolls through the passive tree, so that if you're using 2 of these, you're able to get 5 rerolls. It also makes the first 2 times have no cost, and those do stack. So you're able to get 5 rerolls, and 4 of those will be free. This is huge. This allows you to, with like 8 or 10,000 favor, not a huge amount of favor, be able to sort through 5 pages, or I guess I should say 6 pages, since you also have the initial page, of rewards, and basically just kind of go big game hunting, looking for really valuable synth bases, fractured items, just, you know, currency, lots of divine orbs, that sort of thing. It does kind of change the calculus of dealing with Ritual for me. Historically, I've always looked at Ritual as something where, like, you know, if I see something that's a little bit valuable, more than a couple chaos, I just take it and then I'm done with the Ritual, or I defer it if I can't afford it, and then I'll try to continue deferring it. But deferring is kind of a bad gamble. Like, deferring by default costs 15% of the base cost of the item. So if an item costs 10,000 favor initially, it would cost 1,500 to defer. And as you keep reducing the cost, you know, you're putting it on layaway. You're paying 10% of the upfront cost and reducing the future cost by 10%. But then you're also paying a deferral fee, 5%. Now you're able to reduce that somewhat through some of the passives in the passive tree. Over, I believe over here, let's get off of that back to basic setup. Yeah, okay, over here, slightly cheaper to defer ritual favors. but you're still paying a fee. You're still paying, what is this, 25% reduced? So you're still paying over 3% of the cost just as an upfront fee. So deferring hasn't really been that great of a strategy unless it's something that you can't afford upfront that is very valuable, like a mirror or a mage blood or something like that. This was really the scarab that caught my eye, and I was kind of surprised. You know, I wasn't surprised by the ritual scarab of selectiveness being like 1 chaos, very super cheapo. But in testing in the time that I spent playing around with this, the ritual scarabs of abundance were surprisingly not that expensive. You know, they're showing as 3 chaos each in very small supply, but I found them to be maybe more like 5 or 6 chaos and playing around with it. So, you know, not too expensive. I would say all told, including the cost of the map we were spending, these are all self-farmed maps as well, about 16 chaos a map, maybe 15, 16 chaos a map, and I think that's okay. So Ritual Scarab of Abundance is the much more interesting scarab of these two main ritual scarabs, and what it does is it makes the window of items that you are able to buy stuff after doing the rituals, it makes that have 100% increased number of things. So you can run 2 of those, which means you'll have 3 times as many things in each window. So Ritual Scarab of Selectiveness allows you to roll through, instead of 3 windows, it allows you, or I guess 4 windows, the initial window and then 3 extras. It allows you to roll through, instead of 4 of those, it allows you to roll through 6. Ritual Scarab of Abundance then multiplies each of the windows, that the amount of stuff that's in each of those windows by or adds really an extra 100%. So instead of getting 6 windows with 2 Ritual Scarabs of Selectiveness by throwing in a Ritual Scarab of Abundance, you now go from 6 windows to 12 windows worth of stuff, and by adding in another one, you get 18 windows worth of stuff. This is all really good. This is a nice multiplicative engagement or interaction with each other. I really, really like what this has done. It basically allows you to farm ritual about 18 times more effectively than you would have been prior to the patch without a lot of investment, even with using all of the passives to give yourself 4 possible windows per map. You still would have only been getting 4 windows per map as opposed to the 18 that you're getting here. So still more than 4 times as much stuff just from a single map's worth of ritual. And that would, I think, be the biggest takeaway that I've kind of gotten from this, is I was kind of blown away by how good these scarabs are at just making ritual a lot more consistently rewarding. There's a lot more stuff out of it, a lot more chances to look at like, oh, that's an interesting synth item that has terrible stats or is on the wrong base or whatever. But a lot of things where okay, I kind of see this coming together. I think that it is a gamble, but it is maybe like less bad of a gamble than it used to be. So in terms of what I actually did, I ran 64 maps worth of ritual. As you can see, I had this 50 ritual tab here. I had planned to only do 50, but I knew I was going to get some blood-filled vessels from Sacrificial Dew. I got about 8, I think, or so, which would be in line with the average from Sacrificial Dew, and then all the rest I made just using ritual vessels that I had gotten from doing ritual. And I hadn't done any ritual prior to doing this test, so those were all self-farmed from this test. These are the item that you're able to get out of ritual. You're able to right click on these and then click on a ritual, and it will suck up all the monsters that you killed for the first time in that ritual, and then you can put it into the map device like a scarab. You'll notice that there is no ritual scarab, right? There's no scarab for making ritual spawn, and that's because blood vessels are that scarab. And what they do is they increase the number of monsters that are able to spawn at a time, the total number of monsters you get in the rituals in your map, and they make them spawn faster, all of which is good. They also will add in those monsters that you actually sucked up. So the best way to use ritual vessels generally, I don't have any to show off, I ate them all, is to use them on rituals that are near the map boss. If you're just trying to be economical with it, that's the approach. Some people will have a big supply of them. They'll just click every ritual in a map, and that's fine too. But they're not self-sustaining. If you open a map with a blood-filled vessel in it, you can't then use ritual vessels on the rituals that are in that map. So you're taking those ritual blood-filled vessels that you get basically just from bosses. That is really the approach. I like to take any rituals. I kind of like to keep them in my bag, just like like Remnants of Corruption if I'm doing an essence strategy. And then when I get a ritual that is on the map boss, I like to use that, suck up the map boss, and then save that for a future map. So I wound up having 13 of those blood-filled vessels. I set them all in this map here, and then I took all of those and I used those in place of one of the ritual scarabs of selectiveness. So I went from 6 pages down to 5, and it was a little bit more expensive because then instead of no cost for the first 4 rerolls, it was only for the first 2. But then I still got to keep the triple number of stuff in each page, and you do get a little bit more ritual favor when you have a ritual vessel, a blood-filled vessel in. I didn't really find it to be all that much more, but there were some maps where I got like 12, 13,000 instead of the usual 8 to 10. So just one other note here. I did not include any of the drops that I got from the maps themselves. Like I ran 64 maps worth of ritual. I ran the initial 50 and then the 13 blood-filled vessels. And then on the 13th map, I got a divine orb, one of these two right here, that I was not able to afford. I had to defer it. It was like a couple of rolls in. And so I deferred it and I ran one more map and then I pulled it out and I stuck it in my stash because I felt like, I'm not going to leave a divine orb hanging. Other than that, I didn't include any of the drops I got from the maps themselves. I just put it into regular currency tabs. I only counted big stuff from the rituals. So in terms of what I did, my goal was to run ritual in boss rushable maps with good layouts that could be cleared quickly and preferably have a good div card. That basically just boils it down to Dunes. Dunes is pretty much the only good option. We can clear maps in about 4 minutes on average. Like you could do Jungle Valley or something, but Jungle Valley has a terrible boss, very slow, very boring. It would add a ton of time. So I think I could clear maps in about 4 minutes on average. That's about 2 minutes, maybe 2.5, doing the rituals and buying the stuff. And then the other 90 seconds to 2 minutes is in clearing the map itself. So I will just show off the Atlas passive tree I'm using here. I come up the gut here. I'm taking Scarab stuff. I'm taking map mod effect. I'm taking all the map mod effect I can. I am taking this little point here, invasive adversaries. I'm taking eternal torment. We're not doing back to basics. We have to actually have the ability to spawn stuff on the map in order to do ritual. So I'm doing blue. I like blue more than red. Red definitely would make more sense in terms of pathing, save you a bit of points. You'll see I'm not able to afford this little arm here, and I do have to give up 2% quant in order to get flexible dogma, which you don't have to take, but I found that to be pretty useful for the strategy where I was using blood-filled vessels and I didn't have 2 of the ritual scarabs of selectiveness. And even for that last page reroll, I just found flexible dogma to be kind of nice because rerolling favors, switching pages costs 2k, and with this, that's, what is that, 18%, 24, 30% less, so that's 1400 to reroll. Pretty decent. One important thing here is if you are playing around with blood-filled vessels, you don't need the Sacred Lands wheel. I still came down here because I like the haunted modifiers, devoted modifiers. I want to play around with all the league mechanic stuff, so I took all of that. I also do like torment monsters and possessed monsters in the map, so I took all of that. But again, all of this stuff can vary however much you want. Really, the main thing here is I just took all the ritual nodes, and definitely take Sacred Lands. If you're not playing around with blood-filled vessels, you do want your rituals to actually spawn in the maps. But if you are using blood-filled vessels, they're guaranteed, so you don't need Sacred Lands at all. I didn't take the keystones. Arbitrary tenets favors costing between 90% less and 80% more. It's an interesting idea. It really adds like yet another layer of gamble onto all the gambling. I think it could be good, but I didn't want to run the risk, and this is sort of my philosophy throughout the whole process. Like if I only had like 3k favor, 4k favor left or something, I generally tried to hold, like if it's the first couple of pages, I would just try not to spend. Even if I saw like 2 chaos in the first page, I'm not buying that. I'm not deferring it. I'm just holding until the last page, and then I will buy up everything I can. But if I see anything interesting or valuable along the way, I will defer that, right? Okay, so because of that, I didn't want to get into a situation where I get to the last page and I click the button, it rerolls, and there's a mirror sitting there, and it costs 12,000 favor and I have 10,000, and I'm sad, or whatever. It would cost like a couple thousand to defer and I don't have enough. I didn't want to entertain the possibility of something very depressing happening. And that is my recommendation with all of this. Gamble, that is the point of it as a mechanic, but don't gamble in a way that's going to set yourself up for failure. You know, if you only have like 3k favor left and you're looking at that last page reroll and it's going to cost 1400, so you're going to have like 2k left, you may be looking at something that you would want to defer and you're not able to. Maybe just buy everything that's on that page and shut the ritual down. I did that a couple of times, got a couple of chaos out of the deal, and I felt better about not running the risk of, you know, looking at a mage blood or something that I wanted and couldn't afford. So I took all of the rest of the other small nodes, except for this one right here, the increased ritual splinters. I didn't feel that 20% increased pack size justified 2 points, and I definitely didn't want to take immutable dogma. That would make it so you can't reroll favors at all. Terrible point. Actually kind of bricks the whole point of doing ritual, so definitely don't take that keystone at all, but everything else from ritual is really good. Occult devotion is mandatory for ritual altars, is like super valuable. Profitable prayers, getting 2 more rerolls is super valuable. Answered appeals, deferring stuff being a lot cheaper, or a little cheaper anyway, but more importantly, showing up a lot more frequently. Even this right here, increased chance of rituals with special rewards, super good. And then finally, sacrificial dew, not mandatory. If you're doing a blood-filled vessel strategy where you're using those in every map, then I don't think you can even actually get this to proc, so you could drop this point along with dropping sacred lands. It's fine. It's very small optimization, ultimately. So that's the Atlas passive tree. I've obviously already talked about the scarabs that I was running. I just ran, you know, two of each of these bad boys, except for when I was playing with blood-filled vessels, in which case I ran 1 selectiveness and then still 2 abundance. You could do it the other way. You could do 1 abundance and 2 selectiveness if you wanted, just to keep things a little cheaper, but abundance are pretty cheap. People don't really love ritual, and that's fine. As for the map device, straight quant, baby. No reason to run anything else. Didn't feel like anything else was of value, and I guess you could run ritual. I think it's only like 4 chaos, but again, that's 4 chaos I don't think you need to spend. All right, finally, does this create a lot of bubblegum currency or anything like that? I actually think it does. I didn't include any of that in this. I didn't include anything except for the big ticket items, and we're going to take a look at those now. It created a lot of fractured and synthesized gear that can be worth a lot, but it requires a lot of game knowledge in order to identify and sell it. So let's take a look at the Wealthy Exile tab. As you can see, 19 divines for 64 maps, so that is 19 divided by 64, about 0.29, 0.3 of a divine per map. And we're saying that divines are right around 100 chaos right now. When I started doing this, when I was first playing around with this, divines were quite a lot more. The price of divines has really been swinging all over the place, but let's say I'm making about 30 chaos a map off of this, and I'm spending, I don't know, 15 chaos a map to play with ritual. So yeah, okay, 15 chaos a map. That's not great, but that's also not including any of the bubblegum currency, any of the stuff that I'm pulling out, which frankly probably covers most of the cost. So I'm willing to say that this is like 25 chaos per map that I'm actually making in terms of like real value. I'm only spending 2 to 2.5 minutes per map. So if we say that's like 22, 25 maps per hour, 700 chaos an hour, 7 divines an hour, something like that. Even if we say it's 20 maps an hour, 3 minutes a map, you know, 29 chaos, or let's say it's 25 chaos and 20 maps per hour, 5 divines an hour, 500 chaos an hour. I think that's not particularly insane, but as you can see here, there is a lot of stuff that is maybe a little bit more valuable in bulk. Being able to sell omens of amelioration, blanching, jeweler, that sort of thing can be a little bit more valuable in bulk. What I really found more interesting was not really the value of things. A lot of the stuff has shifted around, like quite a bit. And maybe I am overestimating how much random bubblegum garbage currency I pulled out of the rituals as relative to their cost. Maybe the cost is a little bit higher. What I found more interesting here is some of these items like flaring all flame embers of Wildwood cultists. I pulled 3 of those out, which was pretty interesting. I sort of tried to divide everything up in this top section is from the first 50 maps, and then everything down here is the final 14. I was really blown away by how many omens I got out of ritual. I got a ton of omens, as you can see, and some of these are pretty valuable. I like to throw all of these basically into my 50 chaos tab generally. That's how I've been doing it, and they've sold pretty quickly. I don't know that omens of the jeweler will sell there, but yeah, I was very happy with that. Enlightened support, I got that randomly out of a ritual. That was pretty nice. A lot of horns, or multiple horn scarab to bloodlines. That was cool. And then I got like this Eyes of the Great Wolf with unfortunately not that amazing rolls. The quant is good. It's okay. The power charge on kill is like a real brick. So this is maybe like 30 chaos. Nothing too special. 20, 30, 40, I'm not sure. I got a black flame. That's pretty interesting. The rolls on it aren't incredible. So, you know, how good will this actually wind up being? Maybe it's 50 chaos. It is currently being estimated at 10. And that's sort of the thing here with a lot of this stuff, is it kind of takes a little bit of game knowledge to know exactly how to maximize the value on all these things. You know, this is a lightning coil with actually pretty decent rolls on it. I could maybe consider 6-linking this, like corrupt it and hard 6-link it, try and double corrupt it, see if I can get some implicits and 6-link it from there. You know, maybe it poofs. But like the idea here that you could take something that is probably listed as, I'm just going to guess, like 10 chaos, 8 chaos, and maybe turn that into several divines with you know, some extra chores added on to the end, but there is something there. Again, a 6-link Sadist Garb, a 6-link Crypt Armor. I think the Sadist Garb and the Crypt Armor are both things you could take a couple Deafening Essences of Greed and slap them on there for a couple of minutes until you're happy with some suffixes, and then sell that off to somebody for 50 chaos instead of the 5 that it says it's worth. Or I think they're not even listed in Wealthy Exile at all. I also found some fun div cards, Brush, Paint, and Palette. Doriani's Epiphany, I do have some of those in my stash, so I was planning to shove those in there and actually just, like, you know, see what level 21, 20 transfigured gem I get. Let's do that right now. Why not? It's fun. Cyclone of Tumult. Is that valuable? 2 divines. Sick. All right, so feel pretty good about that. Just go ahead and slap that in the 2 divine tab. I got a bunch of patient cards. It's funny that historically those would have been worth a lot, but Headhunter's like, I don't know, 4 chaos now, so that's worthless. That's just funny. The Prince of Darkness, you can get an Elegant Hubris. Maybe there's some value there. I got a lot of scout cards. I think I got a full stack of scout cards split across like 2 different pages in a single map, which was kind of crazy, but I'll take it. It's always good to have a bit more crafting currency. Bijou, Prejudice, this is worthless, but a Dying Anguish, I always love a nice, like a little bit of a gamble card. I like that a lot. All right, so the most important thing, the most interesting, fun thing here is kind of the random junk. Usually that's kind of the least valuable, least interesting thing, but I think in the case of Ritual, the sort of well-rolled rares, some of the fractured items, synthesized items, those are really the most important, interesting thing. So let's just start with this well-rolled jewel. Crit multi, max life, increased crit with fire spells. Hey, that's like 100 chaos, maybe a divine, something like that. It's got some stats on it, so maybe that could be useful for somebody's build. I think this could be a useful item here. You know, even if I only managed to sell this for like 50 chaos, that's still something. Then there's this, a fractured 9% max mana item that could maybe be useful for an adorned mana setup, something like that, even just a regular mana setup. You know, 80 chaos, 75 chaos, something like that. I think that's pretty decent. Again, not bad. Now here we have this 5% fractured max life. That could be really useful for an adorned setup. So there's 1 at 1 divine, multiple at 2 divine. So this is somewhere in the 1 to 2 divine range. I think that's pretty good. Got a couple of other items here. This synth murderous eye jewel with 2 prefixes on it. I don't know how much this is really worth. You know, bit difficult to evaluate. Right, there's nothing here. Definitely, that is the kind of thing that can be a little bit difficult to evaluate with a lot of these synth items, fractured items, is like, you know, how do you tell what this is actually worth? And the answer is, I don't know, it takes a little while of kind of looking around, researching. Maybe this is worth 50 chaos, 100 chaos, something like that. Maybe not. Maybe I never sell this. That's always a gamble with a lot of items too. Maybe, you know, maybe it's worth a lot if you craft it up right, and it's kind of worthless if you don't, and you have to know what somebody's looking for with their build for it to ever be valuable. The same kind of goes with an item like these boots here. 6% increased move speed and -1 to total mana cost of skills. Very strange synth implicits. Synth items are fun and crazy. This ring here as well, conductivity on hit ring as an implicit, that's pretty decent. That could be worth a little bit. Minus or reduced mana cost of skills, again, very strange. So, you know, this is like a divine or so, kind of at bare minimum. This is a divine, not too shabby. And then we have 2 other really interesting things here. This really well-rolled energy shield damage with hits against chilled enemies. This of Puharte gloves. Very fascinating stuff here. I think this one could be, as you can see, worth quite a few divines with a really good energy shield roll. Obviously, it would be nice if that set of prefixes were a little bit better, but, you know, still pretty good. This might be worth a double-digit amount of divines. I don't think so. I don't really think it's quite as good as some of the other ones that I'm sure are listed down here, but even if you could get like 3 to 5 divines out of this, that's pretty decent. And then I think the real like piece de resistance here is this 7% increase fractured max life. This is a dozen divines. None of this got included in the Wealthy Exile valuation at like 19 divines, and this is realistically probably another 15 to 20 divines worth of random stuff that I was able to evaluate. Also, this ring right here, this unset hunter ring, that's probably anywhere from 20 to 40 chaos. Again, just another thing to kind of file away and sell off. Oh, also, you know what? Some terrible Venter's Gambles. Those are always a fun, easy 3 to 1. Let's see. What do we get? Anything good? Nope. It never is, but you know, it's fun to play around. And so that is the thing with Ritual. I like it. I think I've finally come around to liking it, but it does rely on you actually kind of knowing enough about the game to look at an item like this and go, oh my God, that's money, instead of being like, that is a jewel. It also takes looking at all of the fractured and synthesized items that seem like they could be valuable to evaluate them along the way. But ultimately, you know, if you have a little bit of an idea what you're doing, it can be helpful. Again, this 80 max life, T1 max life Onyx amulet, not hugely valuable. Shame that that's on an amulet instead of some other more valuable base, but that could be okay. These windbreak boots, not very valuable. And then this synthesized jeweled foil with increased max energy shield is terrible. I just saw it like, yeah, that's pretty interesting. So ultimately, I think I've kind of become a fan of Ritual just in playing around with it for a little bit, just because it is kind of a low stakes gamble. Just to kind of rattle off my last little bit of the standard FAQ, is it fast? Absolutely, speed is king here. Speed is kind of king with any sort of farm strategy, but this is definitely one where you want to just be churning through as many maps, as many of those favor windows as you possibly can, because the whole idea here really isn't that you're doing a huge investment on any one map, on any one page. It's really about just churn through those pages, burn through them, burn through them, burn through them until you find something super valuable. Maybe you are doing this as somebody who is still learning about the game. I think Ritual's a great way to actually kind of learn about a lot of these weird items and figure out like, oh my God, this thing is worth, I thought, you know, like random one cast crap. It's actually 15 divines. Like that kind of thing can be really valuable, teach you a lot more about the game just by playing around with this very different, weird strategy. But even if you're just playing this as like just looking for currency and valuable div cards and like obviously valuable uniques like Mage Blood, even if that's all the approach that you're taking, that is still fine. You just want to churn through pages, churn through maps as quickly as you can so you can see more. Like I said, it is addictive, like gambling. So, you know, I don't think it scales with quant or map mod effect or rarity or any of those sorts of things. It's also kind of just like, as a mechanic, kind of simple. You basically just kill guys. Like I even wrote in my notes here. What did I say here? I think it's one of the easiest League mechanics ever in terms of difficulty. It's just mapping, but in a circle. Right, that is exactly what it is. But I think it is a fun gamble that will really reward you if you stick with it for a while. And if you have a fair amount of game knowledge, it really can be rewarding. I think that's probably the biggest problem with it, is that it does take some game knowledge to really maximize its value, but it can be valuable even without any, and it will help you get that game knowledge. So not a bad use of time. You do need to know what items are worth something, and that can take some time spent playing the game and figuring out how to evaluate things. So I don't think it's the most beginner friendly strategy by any stretch, despite all of the other positives, the simplicity and the low cost. But, you know, if you want to take your game knowledge to another level, doing Ritual and learning what things are good and what things are worthless is a good approach. So ultimately, I like Ritual now. It's not a huge consistent moneymaker, but it does actually generate a decent amount of currency. I mean, as I said, I think this is like, it said that I had 19 divines worth of stuff in this tab. If we actually look at the tab and kind of evaluate everything, I think that's actually an underestimation by like 50-60%. I probably made more like 40 something divines in those 64 maps. And, you know, 40 something divines in 60 maps, 64 maps. That is closer to like 60 something chaos a map. if we're churning those maps out, we'll say 62 chaos a map. Obviously, there's some cost, even if we say the net loss is like 12 or 10 chaos. If we're churning those maps out in 2.5 minutes, that's like 22 maps an hour. I mean, that's 10 divines, over 10 divines an hour. It's very RNG. I don't want anybody to get hung up on the numbers. I definitely don't want anybody to get hung up on the numbers. This is like, you know, this is a gamble strategy, right? Don't worry too much about what is and isn't profitable with Ritual. Ultimately, it is a gamble. It's a kind of low cost one. I do think it can be pretty valuable. It's pretty fun. And I was definitely very pleased with how it all came together. Now, the problem, obviously, with all of this stuff is I'm going to have to actually sell it to realize those profits. But I did just get 4 raw divines out of the deal, so that'll be nice to throw into my currency tab, but feel pretty happy about that. But yeah, I think in the future, I probably will continue playing around with Ritual, kind of treat that as like just a quick, cheap, easy, low stakes gamble. And maybe I will get lucky and actually pull like a Mage Blood or a Mirror out of it at some point. Eventually I will. If you do it long enough, eventually you will get lucky. All right, that's it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Bye.